Most people think political collapse is loud. Sirens, headlines, a single dramatic moment everyone can point to. But real unraveling is quieter than that. It starts behind closed doors with an idea that sounds ridiculous until it doesn't. And by the time it becomes obvious, the damage has already been done. This story isn't just about Greenland, or tariffs, or immigration. It's about how power behaves when loyalty is demanded but never returned. How institutions react when fear stops working, and why a leader who thrives on chaos can suddenly find himself facing resistance he can't control. Stay with me, because once you see the pattern, you won't unsee it. Picture a quiet morning in Washington. On the surface, everything looks normal. The usual press briefings, the usual statements, the usual rhythm. But underneath that calm, there's tension. People checking phones, staff trading looks without speaking, because they can feel it. Today is going to be one of those days. And somewhere inside the West Wing, the same idea circles again, an idea that plays like a headline, but functions like a test. Greenland. Not because a single territory is the whole story, but because it reveals the real question. Does the system still flinch when he speaks? For this president, power has never been primarily about process. It's about dominance, about submission, about loyalty flowing upward without conditions. And that's exactly why moments like this matter. Because when someone treats disagreement as betrayal, the system eventually has to choose: keep flinching or start resisting. When pushback begins, it rarely arrives as a dramatic rebellion. It arrives as hedging, carefully worded statements, a pause where there used to be an instant endorsement. That's how institutional resistance looks in real life: slow, procedural, and stubborn. And here's the danger for any leader who relies on fear. Fear only works when people believe compliance will protect them. But once people conclude that loyalty doesn't buy safety, fear stops being a leash and becomes a reason to escape. That's when a party starts having private conversations it avoided for years, not about ideology, not about headlines, about survival. Because at a certain point, lawmakers realize something simple: you can't build a stable coalition around permanent volatility. In the House, thin majorities make every tremor dangerous. When margins are razor thin, symbolic chaos stops being entertainment and becomes a threat. So leaders go into damage control mode, downplaying, reframing, insisting nothing is happening as even the contradictions pile up. Not because they believe it, because acknowledging reality would force a choice they're trying to delay: defend the leader or defend the institution. And when that tension grows, the leader interprets it the only way he knows, not as policy disagreement, but as personal disloyalty. There's a reason chaos-focused politics struggles against institutions. Chaos thrives on spectacle. Institutions thrive on process. The moment resistance becomes procedural, hearings, statutes, court challenges, rulemaking, the fight moves onto terrain where instinct and volume matter less. And that's when the usual strategy, attack the media, escalate the rhetoric, punish dissenters, starts producing diminishing returns. Because volume can't replace coherence, and over time, constant crisis stops energizing people and starts exhausting them. And exhaustion, quiet, steady exhaustion, is one of the most dangerous things for a movement built on fear. Now, layer in immigration enforcement. This is where politics stops being abstract, because the consequences show up locally, in communities, workplaces, classrooms, and courtrooms. The debate stops being policy preference and becomes something more fundamental: accountability versus power. And here's the hard truth: systems built to intimidate don't get fixed by better messaging. They get fixed by rules, oversight, transparency, and consequences. That's why immigration becomes a mirror, not because it's the only issue, but because it reveals the governing philosophy underneath: unchecked authority, minimal accountability, dissent treated as hostility. This is the phase most people misunderstand. They expect a single collapse, but what actually happens is slower. Resistance accumulates, obstacles multiply, contradictions harden, and support becomes conditional. Calls don't get returned right away, statements get delayed, allies hedge, defenses get softer. Not because everyone suddenly changes beliefs, but because self-preservation beats loyalty when loyalty guarantees nothing. That's the turning point, when opponents stop acting like the leader is inevitable. Because once inevitability disappears, leverage goes with it, and the storm starts burning itself out, not with a bang, but with diminishing returns. If there's a final insight here, it's this: democracy doesn't erode all at once. It erodes when fear replaces accountability, slowly, quietly, and repeatedly. And it recovers the same way, not through perfect leaders, but through defended limits. This story isn't ultimately about one man, one issue, or one headline. It's about whether institutions, lawmakers, and voters recognize the warning signs and refuse to normalize power without restraint. Because unchecked power always overplays its hand eventually. And when it does, the only thing that decides the outcome is whether people are paying attention. I'm Jack Reynolds, and this has been The Jack Reynolds Show. If you want more clear analysis without the noise, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.